So today we're going to talk about, I think, one of the only films that I ever have heard of that's based on a short story, but then had a novelization written at the same time by the two guys who wrote the screenplay and also worked on the novelization. It's a very confusing way of like what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
So I guess
I had the same problem when I did my research about it in college for a film. We had to pick a movie, and I picked this movie. Right. So when I did my film class, my teacher said, write on a piece of paper, just without fresh out of your mind, what's your two favorite movies right now? And I put 2001 and Maltese Falcon.
Oh, well, we've talked Maltese Falcon, so what are we going to do?
Yeah, so it's now opportunity. And you picked this movie. We're going to talk about what people regard as Kubrick's masterpiece. It's 2001.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us, and the loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, we do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and great content and an opportunity for some movies we can review in the future on this show. Both Kyle and I are members of Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about, of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes. Since the dawn of man, a mysterious monolith has appeared at important moments of human evolution. And in the very near future of 2001, Doctors David Bowman and Frank Poole aboard the Discovery 1 are traveling to Jupiter to investigate a radio signal sent from an unknown source that just may be tied to the monolith.
So I've actually had the opportunity to see this movie 3 times in the theater.
Oh,
but,
wow.
With background, and it's like we talked with the launching, it's hard to find the original source material. A lot of biographers say that Spielberg was already interested in doing a sci-fi when he's on set of Dr. Strangelove. He was talking to people about this, things. And I think the catalyst was, and I think he shot a film at the World Fair. And I think from there, that was kind of like the engine going, let's go with this.
Well, there was a film that he saw at the World's Fair in '64. And what was the title of that one? That was called To the Moon and Beyond. And then he also had seen a 1960 animated short called Universe that had kind of like springboarded his ideas. Didn't really know what he wanted to do exactly, but he knew he wanted to tackle extraterrestrial life. And he was commonly criticizing, recent sci-fi fare as not being all that,
very
well-crafted.
campy. There wasn't a word for that time. Very campy, very silly, just phaser guns and all that stuff.
Yeah, so he was kind of interested in making what he would say, good science fiction film.
Very introspective. Kind of like we're just not going to travel to the moon and just shoot lasers and colonize. We're actually doing more of an investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it tie into what the hell are we doing on Earth as well. So, pre-production, I think somebody mentioned one of his writers, maybe you want to call up Arthur C. Clarke to do something like that.
Because Kubrick had been interested in working with a sci-fi writer. He had gone through a dozen different kind of ideas of who I can work with. And I love the description of Arthur C. Clarke given to him by his friend from Colorado. He said he's a nut in a tree and a recluse that you will not want to speak to.
Well, Kubrick became a recluse eventually.
Yeah. So maybe it's two similar hearts finding each other, I guess.
Also, I remember, if you want to figure it out, Arthur C. Clarke wrote a diary for all their workings on this movie with Kubrick. It's called The Lost Worlds of 2001. He published it in 1972. It's a journal, kind of like what they were working on, his insights of what they want to do in beginning the movie. And initially, I don't think The Dawn of Man was even part of this, but they wanted to tie that something was tying in through all stages of human evolution.
Yeah.
So they wanted something visceral, something visual, and I don't think initially what the monolith was supposed to be like a prism or something like that.
Well, in the 1951 short story, The Sentinel, it is a tetrahedral pyramid, a pyramid with 4 sides. And it's kind of got this like Mayan blockiness brick to the whole thing. I saw an image from it. It's captivating, but it would have been, I think, difficult to make it seem like realistic. It kind of works in a short story when you have a little cartoon drawing of it on the side, but I think making it in a film might have been tough to really sell the grandeur of it and the idea of the monolith basically being this like slab, it's very simple. Yes, and it's simplistic, but also the idea that when that shows up during the Dawn of Man, there is no technology that because humans weren't around, there was no technology that would have made a perfect slab like that. So obviously it's an indicator of intelligence.
Yeah, I like that. So the beginning of it, when this movie was talked about being made, is also being made at the same time Planet of the Apes is being made.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody's like, we're getting two sci-fi movies at the same time featuring talking apes. This is ridiculous. And sometimes we get that a lot in movies. Sometimes things come out, they're very similar. My God, there was a time when, like 2018, we were getting movies with lighthouses all the time in the movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, the discredit initially was he's making his own Planet of the Apes, as well as why he's hiring people that are consultants for NASA for film videos.
Yeah.
As well.
There was this very big confusion, I guess, because he was coming off of Doctor Strangelove, which was, in many ways...
a black comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very not 2001. Very not most of what he would do with the rest of his career.
Yeah.
And so what was he doing next? Yeah, the idea of those two, I was thinking of Planet of the Apes as I was watching that Dawn of Man sequence, partially because the two variations on how they interpret that are drastically different. Of course, the apes being from the future, sorry, spoiler alert, in Planet of the Apes versus the ones that are in the Dawn of Man sequence. Both very, very well done costuming work on both of those films, but drastically different.
Yeah. It's interesting to note that it's kind of, in my lifetime, kind of weird that we now have all the things, technology that is in this movie that we didn't think we would ever have. I don't think we would have at this point, but we have now that he knew in the late 60s that we probably have.
Yeah.
Video phone conferences.
When she said voice print identification, I was like, whoa, I've heard that exact phrasing of it, in my own life.
Yeah. We just don't have commercial flights to the moon yet. Pan Am's kind of gone away.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But there's a lot of technological features that were shocking at the time. Video phone, you can actually see the person you're talking to. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, the amount of foresight in this film compared to something like Star Trek, which was also doing the same thing of having like communicators that were basically flip phones. And like, it's crazy how in the 60s, maybe we were all just messed up in our minds to the point where we were seeing the future. I don't know. But it's captivating. And I think part of that goes back to what Kubrick wanted. He wanted to do a good, scientifically accurate version of space. In space, there is no sound. So obviously he's going to focus on heavy musical cues and let the sound be silence, which is not what most science fiction films did before and not what most of them have done since.
No, it's vernacular BS when you shoot a laser in space and
yeah.
Because
we forgive it in Star Wars because there's also laser swords and magic floating things. So
yeah. How they did the little miniatures? I think they had a projector inside that showed the people moving. So inside the spacecraft models, they would have like a film projection that would show the people as they're going through space. So it's kind of interesting that there's a lot of, I wouldn't say computer graphics in here, but there's a lot of great special effects that makes it really still convincing at this time.
Yeah, and Keir Dullea, who plays David Bowman, who's still actually been working a lot, even up to like 2014. I saw he was in like 3 or 4 different films.
Yeah.
He had said, I detest when people say that like we started visual effects. Nothing that we did was visual effects in that film. Everything was done in camera practically. And it's crazy. It goes back to, I just saw the argument online yesterday, people talking about how Jurassic Park still looks good in 1993, better than most films today. This film also looks better in 1968 than most films do today. It looks realistic. There was one shot, I think, of one planet that I saw kind of a different kind of film grain to it, and I was like, okay, that's kind of aged, but everything else looks amazing.
Interesting note, there's really very, very little exposition dialogue. Obviously, you get the meeting conference, which is just kind of showing off the situation of what are we, but a lot of it is just casual dialogue that you see between people that would be in the situation.
Yeah.
So it's the world building is very visual world building. It's not people telling you about it, which is interesting because when you do sci-fi, you have to have this world, dialogue set up the like a screen or something like that. Star Wars got a big scroll.
Yeah, that's true.
They tell you what's going on. But here, Kubrick likes to tell it visually. I mean, in the beginning of the movie, you have these apes. They can't talk to you, but it's almost like a silent movie. Kind of thing. Yeah.
I still remember to this day, this was actually one of the rare films, and I've said this before, Kubrick and I do not agree on first viewing. And so this is one of the rare films that when I was watching, I was like, what the hell did I put in? Did I put the wrong movie in? And I pulled it out about an hour into the movie. I returned it to the video store. I was like, no, not interested. And it wasn't until a couple years later that someone convinced me, no. Go back and watch it all the way through, and I think you'll have a good feeling of it. I did just the exact same thing, and I was like, okay, I feel like I get it now. But part of me was like, this is not a movie for me to watch at 2 a.m.
No. This is a movie that you're supposed to watch at 10 p.m. Altered states, and you're like, I get it, man.
Yeah, now I understand.
There was one time in 1998, and I was in altered consciousness, and I totally got it.
Yeah, I felt like reaching.
And I didn't write anything. I didn't write it down, but I was like, I totally get what he's doing, man.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the central disagreements between Clark and Kubrick, and just because Kubrick was, again, doing something kind of insane. You said it yourself. Sci-fi films are almost 90% exposition. Yeah. This is a film that is 1%. It's just enough to kind of get your emotional storytelling going. But I always tell people, if you wanted to understand 2001, read the book, because I do think the book goes deep into all those elements. I love the book. And also, if you really want to understand what's happening in 2001, I always suggest, I love 2010. I think 2010 is great. I still think 2001 is a better made movie, but like 2010 is fantastic for what it is. And if you're looking for understanding the story because you need more, that's your go-to, is double feature those.
Yeah. Also, the other feature of, this is 68, so this is very much the infancy of computers. This is basically computers are not really talking to each other. Now we have the internet, they're always talking to each other. So you usually, my grandfather was a computer fixer, and usually if you had a problem with a computer in Boston, you had to go to Boston. You just couldn't dial up and talk to the computer from your locations. But the interesting note that we would have computers running everything in 68 was kind of really a lot of forward thinking.
Yeah.
Not to mention you would have problems communicating with your computer or something like a virus or something like that as well.
Yeah. And what's funny too, so we've talked about those 2 short films that Kubrick watched that kind of genesised his ideas.
Right.
One of them was the 1960 animated short Universe. And he actually went ahead and hired that film's narrator to voice HAL 9000, the robot in the film. So that's how he came to get Douglas Rain, who was a voice actor for that film, into HAL 9000, which essentially is his most famous role by a stretch.
And when we eat paste food. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a great opportunity. I think for the background, I think that up next will kind of be my review, and I'm going to give a lot of my themes analysis of what this movie is about. So 2001, I'm sure if you go to film history class, would probably one of those requirements to watch. If you like Kubrick, it's probably one of those movies you're going to have to see. If you like kind of the breakup of a content story, this is kind of revolutionary. It's not kind of like a David Lynch vignette, but there's certain stages that kind of give an explanation. It's very, very visceral, and you have to really try your patience. I know a lot of people this era don't have the patience to watch this kind of thing.
I think it's a movie that you have to know what... This is actually one of the rare ones. I think you do have to know what you're getting into with this movie. Most films, I say, go in blind. This is one I think you do your prep work, because in many ways it is kind of an anthology movie.
That's
where the
what I'm trying
pieces come together later on.
Yeah. It's a mixture of different time pieces, slices, to get to point A to point B. So, what Kubrick is trying to establish in The Dawn of Man is the evolutionary step that how do we get here, not building spacecrafts, from the very beginning of the smarter people realizing from just the bones that we can have not only weapons, but we can make tools. And it's very interesting, the first construct of something and an advantage that those tribal groups have an advantage over the others is the same bone that he throws up in the celebratory that he figured everything out, is also then you get the slice of now we are advanced to making spacecrafts in space. Almost it's one of the greatest cinematic cuts of all time. It is kind of sloppy, but that's kind of the intent.
Yeah, you can kind of see that. But I think part of it is because everything's moving so fast that it almost works beside the sloppiness. Like it works because of the sloppiness.
Yeah, and I think it's not a very smooth edit, but it's one of those gigantic edits. But it shows that it hasn't been a smooth transition, but here we are now.
Yeah. Every time I watch it, I have that Leo DiCaprio thing of like, hey, watch this part. It's coming. Oh, there it is. Like, I'm excited for that cut every time, and I know it. And every time I think to myself, whoa.
I like that. Even the pre-dawn humans and then the space guy, they all want to touch it.
Yeah.
It's just the most human instinct is like, all right, I want to touch it. Is that smooth? Right.
Yeah. That's why I believe there's a common recurring theme on SpongeBob where Patrick wants to touch everything he sees, and he's like, touch. Quit doing that. Touch. It's because we kind of, human beings are kind of set on their own path of self-destruction. We are going to, we're like the cat who needs to burn himself on the stovetop just to understand that maybe we shouldn't do that.
So I always view the monolith as kind of a monitor to every important stage of human evolution. And everything you see is the infancy stage of first steps for everything. Remember, this first ship to go wherever, going to Jupiter. And it's the first evolution step of figuring out that you can make tools and weapons. And then once you figure that out, you can go to the next stage, which is the third one, is the Stargate. Which I think it's the Stargate. It's kind of like this colonial room with all the glass and there's not a speck of dust anywhere. But I think it's beyond time. That's my theory. That's why he sees every stage of aging all at once.
Yeah, he witnesses his entire being progress all through one moment in time. Because I think in order to fully ascend to the next plane of existence, you have to
get out of the
master this one.
Yes, yes. So I think it's almost like he's outside the dimension of time, which we are, three-dimensional time, but also that's why he's going all at once.
Yeah.
All at once.
Yeah, and I think, the Stargate sequence, which I think is the first screensaver in cinema history, because it goes on for a while, and I think it's very eclectic, and now people can make it in about 5 minutes on their computer. It's fascinating to me that this is a movie. I see the monolith as kind of the pusher, if you will. It's the thing that kind of triggers that moment, because I think we often say that when we eventually meet an extraterrestrial intelligence, it won't be English that they speak. It won't be a language that it speaks, but the universal language of math, of geometry, and how do we create a slab rectangle is by the use of angles and lines. And like I said, it's like that kind of speech pattern that we would receive from an extraterrestrial life is that we wouldn't understand it, but they would understand us because they're so heavily involved.
Yeah, and it's great to actually call up Carl Sagan, and he's right. If you met anybody that an alien, an identity, they would be far advanced in your intelligence than us.
Yeah.
And how to communicate them, you would probably have a difficult time communicating because, try to explain the universe to an ant.
Yeah, exactly.
So he always said, if my fear of an alien existence would be super intelligence. And I think that was Kubrick's way of showing it not really hokey with little aliens with big eyes and, dangling ears and googling with lasers and trying to colonize rather than trying to explain to you what you're going on. Not to mention human error of trusting computers to run everything is going to fault you on the way too. Yeah,
and Carl Sagan, actually, I would credit him as perhaps saving the film, because I know that Kubrick and Clark had a discussion about how the alien presence should it be men in suits? And my God, if you had men in suits playing extraterrestrials in this film during the planning process, I think that would have upended the whole thing. But you're very much right about that, where I think even the Sentinel, the short story that this is conceived from, is very much about that tetrahedral pyramid thing that gets destroyed basically in the course of the story. Is that the humans are trying to understand this floating thing, they destroy it, and then they learn that it's basically taking their information. So by destroying it, you're alerting the alien presence out there that you exist and you are smart enough to interact with it, and therefore the idea is now they know.
I agree with you. Yeah. It is almost a barometer testament of, have you got to the stage where we're comfortable communicating at this level?
Yeah, and you can see that throughout the film, is that human beings, every time we are pushed forward on the evolutional path, we push ourselves further towards extinction. I find it so fascinating, that little short story of the dawn of man, where he gains the ability to problem solve this creature, and the first thing he does is, I'm going to kill the thing that's killing me, which is fair, and then I am going to rule.
I'm
going to kill ourselves. I'm going to kill our own kind, and I'm going to rule. And I think that's such a fascinating thing of, within moments of understanding problem solving, we use it in violent ways to take over. Yeah. And in many ways, that is kind of the creation of Hal. It's a violent takeover.
Yeah. And it's always the first step of first things. Mm-hmm. Of every moment is the first thing of even him going into the Stargate. Yeah. Which is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to point out, because we never really talk about the actors in the monkey suits. We credit the actors that are there, but Daniel Richter played the character Moonwatcher, which is the lead ape creature from the Dawn of Man. He was a mime, and I think his performance is great. I think it's the kind of thing where, in lesser hands, that looks goofy, and it ruins the movie before you get out of 15 minutes.
That's very dangerous, right?
Yes.
That's very risky to put this kind of thing in the movie, people in ape suits. Because we talked about Bad and Beautiful.
Yep.
Where we're going to put a man in an ape suit, and they're like, oh, we're not doing that.
Yeah,
right?
there. You can probably count the number of times in classic Hollywood cinema that a person in an ape suit looks realistic on one hand. Like, you can probably really break it down where it works as a very infrequent thing. And what if you lost? I mean, it's not like it's a 5-minute scene. If it was a 5-minute scene, doesn't matter if it really doesn't work as the movie's going. This is like 15, 20 minutes of the movie. This is a chunk of the movie.
And every time I watch this movie, I wonder if Haywood Floyd's call to his daughter, if that got transmitted. If she really his daughter. You always wondered, like, after watching, like, could you tell Mommy I called? Yeah. I always wondered, did that really happen, or...
Probably not. I mean,
Probably.
then again, Vivian Lee, who plays the daughter, or Vivian Kubrick, who's Stanley's daughter, she plays the daughter in the film, and if she is as
but you always
neurotic
wondered,
as he was, then she probably did get the message to Mom.
I love all the caption shots. It's very interesting to put the moon in the glass when the phone call. Also, the floating pen, which is about 10 minutes of cinema. It's 10 minutes of time just to get the pen and put it back in there. But it demonstrates all the visual language, visual exposition of what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's always up for analysis what we're doing. If you disagree with our point of views, please put in the comments of something we haven't catched or something you want to discuss. Keep going with it.
Well, that's the thing, is really like your analysis of the film, because it is so storyless. I think this is very much a prism movie where every person who watches it sees a different interpretation of it. And I think that was intentional. I think that is because we are not meant to understand, because we are not evolved enough to be able to be flying to Jupiter. We don't have the technological
Well, to put
understanding.
a waltz in the movie is telling that everything is dancing. Everything is fateful. It's always working together. It's a symphony of everything just in a balance and harmony, rather than a violent takeover like we always see in sci-fi, that everything is kind of all connected and it's in a dance.
Well, yeah, and I think he originally hired a musician to do the work. I think it was the guy that he'd worked with before on Strangelove, I think.
Okay.
And then he decided to go with the temp track, which was the classical stuff. I feel bad for the composer who didn't find out until opening night that his music had been replaced by classical music. But I will say that, not having heard the original score that was written for this, the classic music does give you a sense of grandeur. It gives you a sense of, I think what Kubrick is trying to do here is he's trying to say, like, in a film like, I like Forbidden Planet quite a bit, but that's the one I'm reaching out to. In a film like that, it's very much like, look at all the cool stuff that we've got going on. Look at the monsters. Look at the cool, like, ships and the cool guns.
And it's a version of The Tempest, right?
Yeah.
It's just lifted from a different story.
Whereas Kubrick attacking this film is very much like, do you not understand how amazing it is that we will eventually be floating in space?
Yeah.
Like, and then look at the monkey people that we have here.
Look
like,
how far we
do you
came.
not understand?
Yeah.
Like, I think he's kind of saying, like, with that grandeur of, like, look at this. Be in awe of this. It's insane.
It's saying that we came from here, we're going to go here, and if we can figure out the second act, we can get to the Stargate thing.
Yeah. So I enjoy this movie very much. So if I was looking for flaws, I'd be nitpicking. That's really what it would come down to. It would be tiny nitpicks in an overall film that every time I watch it, my love for it grows. And that's why I say that with Kubrick, I need to watch twice. I need to watch once, take a break, and come back, because I feel like I get on his wavelength on the second view.
I agree. I understand. It's one of those, like, A Clockwork Orange. I'd watch it like 3 times.
Yeah.
Finally,
And it's a film where, like, I do appreciate the fact that we got a sequel that I think is from a different director. It adds a different kind of flavor to it. I will forever lament.
It's very political.
Yeah. I will forever lament that we never got the 2 follow-ups that Tom Hanks was trying to get going. Tom Hanks is a big fan of 2001, and he was originally attached to play Haywood Floyd, the William Sylvester character from this film, which Roy Scheider played in the sequel. Tom Hanks was going to play him in the 3rd and 4th films, which would be adapted from the 3rd and 4th books, because there were 4 books in Clark's original series.
I've read up to 3001.
Yeah, and so I forever lament the fact that we never got to see, like, another director's take on this material and how it would have evolved, because I think it's such a fascinating thing when each film in a series kind of reinterprets the material.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's some books out that are sequels to what's going on. I think 3001 is the best one of the sequels.
Really? I haven't gotten to that one yet, so okay.
Yeah. Haywood Floyd comes back.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that a lot of the ship that's explained gets into Danny Boyle's movie, the sci-fi movie, which is that.
Oh, Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Oh, we're gonna have to talk.
A lot
Sunshine
of the
one
ship,
day.
a lot of the with 3001, a lot of the the swimming pool, but also a pool for plant life and stability and how you can sustain long time on a spaceship was actually used a lot, I think, in Sundown.
Yeah, and I think that's why we look at other films currently, like current sci-fi films. Those great sci-fi films that we have nowadays would not exist if not for 2001, and not just because of Kubrick's direction, but because I don't think Arthur C. Clarke would be as big of a name in the sci-fi writing world if that film hadn't kind of pushed him up again.
Great.
And gotten those series going, because then even his books influence things like Sunshine, or, you know, we wouldn't have Interstellar without this movie and that book. So
Absolutely not. Yeah. So keep the conversation going.
Yeah, let us know down in the comments section what you love or maybe what you hate about the movie. That's okay if you don't.
I understand if you don't have patience for it. It is a slow movie.
I didn't on my first watch because, again, this is a movie that requires the homework of knowing it first. And I think if you watched it without that, it might be problematic. It's why my wife's never watched the movie, is because I've never felt like she's in the right mindset when we're looking for something like that.
You gotta you gotta just almost disconnect from the world, turn everything off, and just absorb what you see.
You know, we did legalize recreational drugs in Minnesota, so maybe now is the time. So yeah, let us know down in the comments your thoughts on the film. What Kubrick film should we cover next? We've covered The Shining, we've covered Clockwork Orange. I recently saw Strangelove for the first time. If you want us to talk about one of these films, comment down below.
Paths of Glory is one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Paths of Glory.
That one I haven't even seen yet. So please join the Patreon and tell me. Force me to watch Paths of Glory. I'll love you forever for it. Thank you guys for joining us. You can find all of my film reviews over at GoFilmReviews.com.
Yes, you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts, even in the outer space.
There you go. In space, no one can hear you podcast except you.
Yeah, there you go.